Child, how y'all doing? Cause look, all right, we'll get into it. Go and grab your something to drink. Get your notepad, your favorite pen. Cozy up. Let's get settled in. What's going on, my fellow grieving hearts? Y'all, I know it's been a minute since I've been on here, but like you guys all know, if you've been with me for the first two episodes, I am actively grieving. And since you saw me last, unfortunately, I have experienced a few more losses in my life, and we'll get to those things later. I wanted to come on here and say Happy New Year. Happy Black History Month for those of the community and those supporting the community. Y'all, this year been beating anybody else's ass. Okay? all right. It's already given too much. Yeah. Find me somewhere in the Bahamas, Bermuda, Bahama. Come on, pretty mama. No, but in all seriousness, you guys, I'm looking down at my phone here because I wanted to come on here and let's just start the conversation, right? I talked to you guys before in my previous videos that, I just want to start off with giving you guys a preview of who I am as a person, sharing a little bit of my life and my family, right, with you as you begin to connect with me in this space. But I really want to use this space to open up the communication, right? There's so many things that are not talked about in the community with grief, and people who are in the grieving community, there are not safe spaces or spaces where we feel like we can truly express those sometimes not always the most positive thoughts, right? But in this conversation, I think it's important to start with knowing what type of grief you are experiencing, right? Because for us to essentially we're trying to solve a problem, but we're not really, there's no solution, right? And in my mind, there is no solution to grief, right? We can find ways to cope, we can find ways to deal, right? But we may be able to find solutions to our procrastination, right? That may be caused by our grief. We may be able to find solutions to, our unhealthy eating habits due to our grief, right? But I think what's most important is to identify, right? Starting with identifying what our grief truly is and what it looks like, so that we can find the ways to be able to maneuver this life with our new selves, right? But before we even get into that, I want to start with a major disclaimer. I am nobody's licensed therapist. I am not an educator of any sort. I am someone who has taken the time to understand what's happening in my mind and my body, and I want to bring that to others into the community, and hopefully open up a space for conversation with you guys down in the comments. Hopefully when we get to enough subscribers, we can get on live with each other and really just open up the space of discovery, right? Because there's still so many things that I am learning about grief and about my grief, right? And so I did a little research, and I just want to tap on and just give you guys a brief overview of a few of the things that I discovered in my research, and maybe give you a little homework if you're down, right? I don't know, everybody ain't with that. So there are 5 different categories of grief. There's anticipatory, acute, normal, disenfranchised, and complicated. So when we talk about anticipatory grief, we talk about, sorry y'all, I got my Invisalign in, so it may sound like I'm talking a little funny, so not too much. Not too much. But anticipatory grief is grief where you or the person who's experiencing maybe some extreme medical illness is anticipating their life changes, anticipating losing their independence, anticipating their death, right? Anticipating having to care for them or losing your freedom, right? And so you begin to anticipate, and that starts early, right? Early on in the process. And then we move into the acute stage of grief where, it's happened, it just happened, it's fresh, you're kind of in shock, you're still yet processing what this all means. And then, there's normal grief, which I think a lot of us are experiencing just on a normal stage. You lose a parent, sibling, aunt, uncle, a relationship, right? And you find yourself just changing your normal habits and things that you used to enjoy. And then we have the disenfranchised grief. This is grief where you can't really talk about it with anybody, right? Because maybe it's not something that's socially acceptable, right? You were divorced and people have their way about divorce, or there were things in your marriage that you don't want to share with people, so you can't share in your grief either, right? Or maybe it's about an abortion, right? And people frown upon those things. And so the disenfranchised is you can't associate with your grief because you don't have a safe space to talk about it. This is your safe space. This is your community. Welcome. Welcome. And then we move into complicated grief, which has a few categories of its own. And that's when you've got layers of grief on top of things. Maybe you haven't been able to heal from previous grief before another loss comes on, right? Or maybe the situation wrapped into that person or that relationship is complicated, right? But I say all those to say that in looking at those, I discovered for myself that I've experienced all of them, right? And I think that is what makes me a good person to sit here with you guys, to open up this conversation. And I've experienced them from a young age, right? From dealing with my parents, being diagnosed with illnesses while I was young, to the anticipating what their life and my life looks like when those scary moments happen, right? And then the normal grief when the illness really set in and the reality came that, they were gone, right? And then the complicated comes in heavy for me because, like, those of you who know, or maybe this is your first video, I lost my mother last year in February. Actually, her anniversary, 2 years ago. 2-year anniversary was February this year, just a couple days ago. I lost my sister 7 months later. And then I lost my dad a year later in the same month that my sister passed. And so when we talk about complicated grief and grief in general, unfortunately, I am well versed in experiencing it, right? And now I'm trying to create a community where I learn how to deal with it and I learn how to move forward and learn how to continue my life as I have changed and now that I'm a new person, right? And so my challenge to you tonight, my call to you, to yourself more so, is that you take the time. Take the time to look up these different types of grief. Figure out where yours lies. Figure out if you're experiencing multiple types, right? And then move into discovering on which stage of grief you're in, right? Because once we've identified the grief in itself, we're able to better understand what we're going through. Oh, here comes hi, my honey. We are able to better understand the stages of grief that we're in, right? And so we start with denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And it takes some of us years, and sometimes we never get there to that final stage of acceptance. Sometimes we stay in denial, or we linger in anger. Sometimes they're all wrapped into each other and we're like a tornado. But understanding what is going on with your mind and your body due to the effects of grief is so important to your mental and your physical health, but the health of your relationships, the health of your job relationships, your friendships, your partnerships. And I think it is due to be reminded that you're not alone. You're welcome here with me on the comfy couch as we dive into some really deep shit. And I'm sorry, y'all, I be cussing. And excuse my dog. This is open, authentic. I'm not editing. I want to come here with my heart open, ready to give and receive what it is that I have gained and am gaining throughout this process. And I hope many of you are willing to join me here on the comfy couch. All right. Until next time.